So now that we have a pretty clear understanding of what genre is, the next thing to do as an editor or as a writer is to create what I call the Foolscap Global Story Grid. And what that represents for an editor is the macro point of view of a story. Well, the macro view is all about putting down on one piece of paper everything in a story. So the most important thing to do as an editor when you're beginning, once you know your genres, is to figure out what's the beginning hook, the middle build, and the ending payoff of this 400 pages of manuscript. And so, for example, because I go through it in the book, why don't we look at The Silence of the Lambs, and I'll walk you through it. So in The Silence of the Lambs, the beginning hook of the story, of course, happens in the very first scene. And that beginning hook is a young FBI trainee is brought in to interview the most sadistic and strange serial killer in the world. So talk about an inciting incident for an entire work. You have a newbie FBI agent who's tasked with going to the craziest serial killer ever in order to help them find somebody who's out slaughtering people as they speak. So that's the inciting incident beginning hook of the story. So if I were Thomas Harris and I was just starting the novel, I would write down, Clarice Starling gets job to interview Hannibal Lecter. That would be at the very top in the beginning hook of my Foolscap Global Story Grid. So next up is, well, what do I do now? Do I do the middle build or do I do the ending payoff? Well, actually what you want to do is you want to do the climax. And because this is the serial killer thriller genre, we know what the climax is going to be because it's a convention. It's an obligatory scene. And what that means is that you want to have your hero confront the bad guy, the villain. So the hero has to confront the bad guy or villain and either win or lose. Now, in a serial killer thriller, you usually want to have the hero win because nobody really likes to know that serial killers are out there getting away with stuff. So Thomas Harris, obviously, at the end of his Foolscap story grid, not that he did this, but he could have written, Clarice Starling catches and kills Buffalo Bill. So that's the beginning of the book, and that's the end of the book. Now, the middle build is really the tricky part, and this is where a lot of people get hung up. The middle build is that moment. It's what I call the all is lost moment. It's an extreme moment that changes everything for your hero. So what does Thomas Harris do? He surprises us. He's brilliant. And what he does in the middle build of that story is he makes Hannibal Lecter escape. Once Hannibal Lecter is off the reservation, Clarice Starling is now completely on her own. He's not going to tell her where Buffalo Bill is. He enjoys watching her go through these machinations. So when Hannibal Lecter escapes, which is about the midpoint of the book, that is the all is lost moment for Clarice Starling, and that is what you're going to write down in your middle build passage. Hannibal Lecter escapes. So in that one-page global Foolscap story grid, we've got the entire outline of the novel. We have Clarice Starling gets the job to hunt down Buffalo Bill and interview Hannibal Lecter. We have Lecter escapes as the midpoint. And then the final, we have Clarice Starling beats Buffalo Bill and takes him down. So the question often arises is how is my method, my Foolscap method, different from Steve's? And it's pretty simple to explain. Steve's Foolscap method is from the point of view of the writer before they're embarking on the journey of writing their first draft. And because that's such an intimidating idea, Steve smartly keeps it very, very short. Now, making a map on one page, I can't recommend that more highly. Now, the difference between Steve's method and mine is the editorial method. Mine is when you've got that 400-page first draft, you've taken a breath, you've relaxed, you haven't gone back and edited anything yet in your manuscript because you really shouldn't. Don't edit yourself when you're writing, and don't write when you edit. But now, you've had your day off, you've had your cup of coffee, you've got your editorial hat on, and I highly recommend getting a hat just to put it on. Now's the time to do my Foolscap method, which is exhaustive. It's like a mechanic opening up the hood of a car and checking it all out when you're getting your car inspected. That is the role of the editor. Now, when you look at my Foolscap Global Story Grid, you're going to take a deep breath and say, holy cow, what have I got myself into? But all of the questions that are on that page are very simple to answer. It's a toolbox for the editor. It's a way of checking the sound systems, all of the wiring of the story to make sure that everything works correctly. And you want to check all the little bits and parts of your story to make sure that you're keeping the focus, you're delivering on those 3 things that you say you're going to do, and you surprise the reader over and over again. And once you get them down, you will be able to improve your story from, oh, well, he escaped because somebody left the key on the floor. That would be maybe that was Thomas Harris's initial idea to get Hannibal Lecter out of the cell. I don't think so, but maybe it was. But if that had been, and he looked at that in his first draft, he'd say, oh, I gotta fix that scene because the fact that somebody dropped their key and he can get out of the cell that way, that's really not gonna work. So these are the ways in which the global Foolscap story grid can teach you how to improve every scene in your book, and also globally. So when you go to create your big global story grid, what the Foolscap page is going to do for you is it's going to give you your major movements. It's going to show you where your beginning hook ends, where your middle build begins, and where your ending payoff is. So using that, you will be able to get a sort of a big, gross, curve of action. So next up is creating what I call the story grid spreadsheet. And there are 64 scenes in The Silence of the Lambs, and you walk through every single one of those scenes to give you how to move from beginning hook to middle build to ending payoff. Is there a way we can make a book that works incredible? Can we take it to the next level? Or a book that doesn't work and make it work, and even maybe a little bit better than that? Well, the way you do that is looking at the micro point of view. And the way you do this requires a lot of blue-collar effort and a lot of hard work, but if you've already written a manuscript, you're very familiar with that anyway.